Okay, hey guys, the point of this video, the topic of this video is to help you guys construct a proportionally accurate human hand, not unlike this one, although we really won't be going deep into the really high resolution sculpting that you see right here, but actually we're going to focus more on how to build something that is proportionally accurate. And what I mean by that is this right here. So when you look at this, we're looking at these fingers and these color groups, and so this is the longest bone in the finger, the middle bone, and the shortest bone. So we're looking at these proportions, which are 4, 3, 2 and a quarter parts. So I'm going to show you a method that we can achieve this pretty quickly and easily. Now, just like I said in class, you could learn this method and you might use it once or twice to sort of lock down these proportions, but after that you're not really going to use this method because it's broken down in a way to really just introduce a lot of different tools to you in the process of this lecture. I mean, you could take a sphere and a good clay brush and a move brush and create a hand with just those tools. But my goal is to take this opportunity with this lecture to introduce you to several tools while we're doing it. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first I want to use my initialize tool with a cylinder, and so I'm going to go over here to my simple brush and click on it and click switch. Now this becomes just a screenshot, so Control N gets rid of that, and then I will grab a cylinder and drag this out and hit edit. I'm also going to turn on my polyframe so we can see the edge loops here. Now I want certain proportions with these edge loops. I will go over here to my initialize menu, and first I want a finger that's going to be a little more hexagonal shaped, because your finger is not really round. At different proportions or different parts of the finger, it kind of transitions from a pentagonal shape to a hexagonal shape. We'll just go with a hexagon. So over here in the H divide, I'm going to click on this and just type in 6, and so now I get this hexagon shape right here. And then also to create those parts that we saw in this picture right here, basically I'm looking at 9 1/4 parts, so we're going to start with 10 and shape this out. Alright, so over here in my V divide, if I want to get 10 sections right here, 10 loops or rings rather, I'm going to click right here and type in 13, and this gives me 10 sections. So once I have what I'm looking for, I'll go over here and hit Make Polymesh 3D. I'm going to turn my floor on to make sure I'm facing the way I want to face. I have this blue Z-axis pointing out towards me, and that's what I'm looking for. So if I press W on my keyboard, I get my gizmo, and I'm going to grab this green rectangle right here and scale that out to the length of a finger. Now what I also want is, I've got this edge right here facing me, and really I want a flat surface facing me. I want the top of the finger to be facing me. So I'm going to hold shift and grab this green rotation axis, and I'm going to rotate this 30 degrees. So now I have the flat side of my finger facing me. And if I want to reset this gizmo, I can hold Alt and open up this little padlock right here, and this kind of round arrow symbol, if I click that, that's going to realign my axes right there. Alright, so this is basically what I'm looking for to begin with. So the next stage in this is your finger is not really just a long tube like this. Your finger tends to be tapered a little more at the top and a little fatter or wider at the bottom. And so I want to show you this deformer that we have. So when I'm in the gizmo, I'm going to click on that little gear, and then this right here, just deformer. I will click on that, and so this right here is kind of it's basically a lattice deformer, and I want to use this to create a sort of a tapered shape to my finger. Now you've got these yellow cones right here, so if I pull any of these yellow cones, you can see I can add more or less dots to this lattice, and these dots, these are my deformers right here. But I don't want to just move one at a time. I'm going to grab all of these dots here at the bottom and use my gizmo to scale them out and create a tapered effect on this finger. So I can either hold Control and choose my mask rectangle. I can mask out those dots, and that leaves me these dots right here, or I could do it the opposite way. I could hold Control Alt and just grab these at the bottom just like that. So you see these dots went away. I'm only working with these right here, and I'm going to grab this yellow square and just scale that just a little bit. So now I have kind of a tapered effect to my finger. When I have what I want, I will click on this little gear, click Accept, and there you go, there's my finger. Alright, I'll press Q on my keyboard to get rid of the gizmo. I don't really need it right this minute, although I think I'll scale that just a little bit longer. Alright, now notice right now, if you look at the floor right here, my finger is incredibly huge compared to the default floor that we get in ZBrush, and that could affect my brush size down the road. So I think I'll just scale this finger kind of way down like that, and this will help me in the future in terms of my brush size and other things. It's just a good way to approach this. So you recall in this picture we have these colored segment groups right here, so 4, 3, 2 1/4. I'd like to give myself some visual cues on the model that I'm working on, so I'm going to use polygroups to help me do that. Now if I hold Control and activate my mask right here, I can mask, I want to mask 1, 2, 3, 4 sections here. If I want to mask 4 sections, I need to actually carry this mask into the 5th section. So I'm going to mask that right there, and you can see that these 4 sections are really dark and have a strong dark mask on them, and then that one's kind of a light mask. Alright, now what I'm going to do is go over here to polygroups, and there is group masked right here. So I click that and I create a polygroup for those 4 sections. A faster way to get to the same thing is to hit Control W, and that gave us a color that's extremely similar to the original. So let's do that one more time. There we go. Alright, so now I have these 4 sections. I want to get 3 sections here, just like that picture. So I draw out my mask, and I'm holding Control to draw this out. And if I want to move this mask around, I can hold spacebar on my keyboard and I can move that around like that. And just like before, if I want these 3 sections, I need to overlap by 1 section, actually in this case in both directions. So if I want to get these 3, I need to mask out these 5. So you can see these 3 that I want have a dark mask, but these 2 on the end have a lighter mask, so they won't get included. And again, I can go over here and hit Group Masked, or the fast way to get there is Control W. Alright, so this gets us, this is what I'm looking for, polygroups here, here, and here. And the only thing left to do is, if you remember in that picture, this top one is 2, and then just this little sliver here at the top, which is a 1/4 part. So what I'm looking to do is shrink this final part. So again, Control, draw out this mask, and I'm just going to mask these top verts or edges right here. Control and click out here in the canvas, and that's going to reverse my mask. And so I bring up my gizmo by pressing W, and I'm just going to pull that down a little bit, so about like that. Then Control, drag out here, get rid of that mask, press Q to get rid of my gizmo. Alright, so now I have this type of polygrouping. This gives me a kind of visual cue that I'm looking for. This tells me where my knuckles are going to be, which will be at the edges of these polygroups. Okay, so now I want to subdivide this in a way that I can sculpt on it a little bit. Now, if I just come over here and start subdividing, you can see I completely lose that hexagonal shape that I started with, and I want to maintain a little bit of it. So what I will do is go over here and turn off this smooth button, and maybe I'll divide this like twice, turn the smooth back on, subdivide some more, and now I have a higher resolution to sculpt on, but I still kind of maintain that hexagonal shape. Now, a faster way to do this, if you remember, is Control D as in dog. Will subdivide this for me. And now I have this I can sculpt on. Now, I'm going to press X and turn on my X symmetry. I'm going to choose a clay build-up brush because that's one of my favorites to sculpt with. And really, I'm just giving myself some little marks here to represent those knuckles. I'm really not sculpting yet. The point of this lecture is not really so much we're going to sculpt a high-res hand like the one I showed you in the beginning, but really we're just building it for now. We're going to build the proportions, and this is a very beginner kind of thing. I'm going to roll this around to the other side, and now I'll choose my Damien standard. I could hit B, D, S, get my Damien standard, and I'm going to make a little mark here along where those poly groups are. Okay, so if I turned off my poly groups, now you can see I have these visual cues to see what's going on with my finger. Now I'm going to hold Shift D, and I'm going to bump down the poly count a little bit on this. So when I hit Shift D, that is the hotkey for bringing these subdivision sliders down. If I press D, this goes back up. If I hit Shift D, I can take them down. And what I want to do with my symmetry on, I'm going to turn this to the side and hold Shift, and I just want to round this out just a little bit. So I'm giving myself that roundness of our finger from the side, like that. And if I wanted to sort of accentuate the shape of this some more, I could press B, M, V and get my move brush. And I could just do a little of this to kind of get that shape I'm looking for out of my finger, like that. Alright, now I press D on my keyboard. It's my hotkey to bring this back up to a higher resolution. Alright, now I want to add my fingernail. I'm going to hold Control and go over here. I don't want my mask rectangle anymore. I want my mask lasso. Now your fingernail is roughly half the length of this bone right here. So roughly half of that, and then I'm going to extract it. Now I'm up here, I'm at 70,000 polys, which is not super high, but I think I'll bring it down a little bit, a little more low poly. And then I'm going to go to my subtool menu. I'm going down to the very bottom. There's this extract. I'm going to turn off double, turn off T-border, and press extract. So you see I get something like this. Alright, now maybe that's the right thickness, maybe not. If I wanted it a little bit thicker or thinner, there's this slider right here. So if I were to crank that way up and hit extract, you see I get something like that. And this is just a preview. As soon as I bump this, it goes away. And so I think that 0.02 was pretty good. I'm going to go to 0.02 right here, hit extract. I get this right here, and I'm going to click accept. And when I accept that, this fingernail becomes its own subtool, and it still has this mask on it. So Control drag, I get rid of it. Go back to the finger, that still has a mask on it. So Control drag, I get rid of it. Now let's look at this finger here. So there's a couple of things. I don't like that I have multiple poly groups here, because down the road this could affect me when I'm using what's called a group split to split things up, separate things. And a group split splits up a mesh based on poly groups, and if I have forgotten that this is multiple poly groups, it could split this fingernail up into several pieces, and I don't really want that. Also, this comes with these crease lines right along here, which I don't really need, and I also kind of have this lumpy shape going around here, Anyway, the bottom line is every time that I extract something, there's two things I'm going to correct immediately. The first thing is the polygroups. So I'll go back over here to my polygroup menu, and I'm going to hit group visible this time. So when I hit group visible, that makes everything in this subtool one polygroup, one color. And then the next thing is I just want to correct this crease that's right here, because if I were trying to smooth this, you see what that crease does? It gives me this jagged edge, and it makes smoothing a little not desired. It's not the way I would want things. So for me to get rid of that real quickly, I'm going to use a Z-remesher. So when I go to Z-remesher over here, this is a fingernail. It doesn't need to be high poly at all, so I'm going to go, by default this is at 5,000. I'm just going to crank it all the way down to 0.1. That's the lowest I can go, and hit Z-remesher. And now I have something low poly that actually, just remeshing it, cleaned up these edges just a little bit, but I think I'll take a move brush and kind of smooth this a little bit. Alright, so maybe something like that. Actually bump this in some more. Alright, so I'm looking at something kind of like this. I think I want to move it a little bit. I want to countersink it into my finger a little bit. I also think it's just a little long. I want to shrink it down. Now I press W on my keyboard to get my gizmo, but you notice my gizmo is way down here, and I could go down here and get it if I wanted to, but an equally fast way to get there would be to hold Control and just tap on this subtool, and when I do that, the gizmo is going to appear on the normal at whatever spot I touched it. And so now that I'm up here, I'm going to hold Control and open that, or I'm sorry, Alt and open that padlock, and then I'm going to click this again and realign the axes. I'm just going to shorten this a little bit because, like I said earlier, I want it to be half the size of this last bone in my finger. And then I'm going to sink it a little bit. Alright, so once I've done that, I'm just playing with the shape a little bit here, just doctoring it a little bit. I'm going to go back to my finger right here, make sure my fingernail is on, and actually, let's see, I can just do this with a smooth brush. I'm just going to smooth that like that. Go back to my fingernail, and I just kind of want to shape this out just a little bit, even though this is not really the focus of what I'm doing. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time sculpting. I'm just wanting to get some good proportions here. Alright. And now, what I think is a pretty good practice and what I like to do is, in many cases, almost every case, if there's an opportunity for me to have parts that are in separate subtools, I'm going to keep it that way. I feel like when you have separate pieces, you have more control. In this case, if I wanted to, at some point, maybe sculpt on this finger right here and give it this little skin that we have around our fingernails, I can sculpt on this area without affecting the fingernail. I could easily sculpt this finger with a fingernail on it and make it all one piece, but if I have a situation like that, every time I add some clay here, I'm going to inevitably mess up something on my fingernail and have to go over here and sculpt and correct that, and then when I do that, I'm going to mess up something over here. But if I have the fingernail and the finger as separate subtools, then I can sculpt around here all I want and never really affect the fingernail. And down the road, I can merge these guys together, I can dynamesh them together, I can do whatever I want to combine them at any point down the line. So I'm not too worried about that. Alright, so I have a finger, I have a fingernail, and if I turn my polyframes back on, I'm looking at this. I want to merge these two guys together for a minute because I'm going to duplicate these. Once I have a finger, I can duplicate this. Now, these polygroups that I did here to separate these knuckles and these bones in the finger, they have served their purpose. I don't really need that anymore. So I can, without any mask on here, I can hit Control W again, and I can give that finger one polygroup. and then of course my fingernail. I can double check that, and boy, that gave me the same color almost. Let's try that again. Okay, so I have this color with the fingernail, I have this color with the finger, and what I want to do now is merge these two guys together. So we have a tool. If I grab this top subtool right here, and then I look right down here, there's a submenu says merge down, and basically that's going to merge down. Whatever subtool is on top is going to merge down with the one beneath it. So I hit merge down, I get this message. I'm going to say it's always okay. And so now I have both these guys in one subtool over here, although they are still separate pieces. They are not fused together in any kind of way. They are still two separate meshes. They're just sharing the same subtool. And I have them as two different poly groups because later I will want to separate these again into separate subtools. And right above this merge menu we have this split menu, and there is group split. So I will use these poly groups to split this up again, which is why earlier I wanted to make sure that that fingernail did not have multiple poly groups within just the one fingernail, because that would have split that fingernail up into multiple pieces, and we didn't want that. Alright, so a couple of things here too. You might notice that when I merge these guys together, we know that we subdivided that finger earlier on in the process, but now I have no subdivisions. So when I merge these two guys together, we lose our subdivisions. But if I wanted to get them back, so let's say I've got this one subtool here, I'm going to go to group split, I'm going to split those back up, go back to my finger. Now I have this button right here, reconstruct subdivisions. And if I click that a few times, that's going to bring back the original subdivisions that I had in that finger. Alright, so we don't really lose them in the overall process, but we do temporarily lose them when we merge these things together. So let me do that one more time. I'm going to go back, merge down. I've got these guys in the same tool, but this right now actually works to our advantage. So we have no subdivisions, and I want to use, I'm going to press W and get my gizmo here. I want to duplicate this finger because I need 5 fingers in all, right? I can use this gizmo to do that, but the process that I want to use, you can only do it to a subtool that does not have subdivisions. So we're in a good place with that right here. I'm going to hold Control, grab this arrow, and I can duplicate just like that. So I can do this with my fingers, and then Control, bring my thumb over here. And notice that when I duplicate things this way, whatever the previous iteration is, the previous duplicate that I have over here is masked out, and always the most recent one, this one here, is not masked out. So over here you see they're all in the same subtool, but I can move this around independently as long as these guys are masked. That can be useful sometimes. Now I could easily have just come over here to the subtool menu. Down here right here is a duplicate button. I could have just clicked that several times and just had multiple subtools here. But in this situation, I kind of like to have them all in the same subtool. And the way for me to do that is using this method with the gizmo I was showing you to duplicate this. Alright, so now I have my fingers. And here's the thing. So we know the thumb is a little shorter. It's a little bit fatter. So I'm just going to scale it a little bit like that. I know that the pinky, I'm going to mask out. Boy, that was terrible. Let me grab a mask rectangle. Mask that. If I control and just tap out here in the canvas somewhere, I can reverse that mask. And then over here, I know if I open up that padlock, holding Alt, and I click right here, I align the axes, and then I can click on this marker right here, and it's going to show up in the center of any part of this mesh that is not masked out. So that helps me to center the gizmo right on this finger with all these other ones masked out. And we know that the pinky is smaller, so I'm going to scale it down like that. And these 3 fingers are actually roughly the same size. So I'm going to leave them like they are. Now, even though these fingers are the same size, you can look at your own hand and you know that they don't line up with each other across the top. And that's because on the back of your hand, your knuckles down here are kind of on an arc. And so what I want to do is I can look at my own hand and see where my fingers line up And so this one might be right about there. And then I can grab this one, control click, reverse. This one might be about right here. And then I can grab my pinky, put it about right there. Alright, so you see these knuckles are kind of on an arc. And I'm just going to leave them right there for the time being. We can tweak this a little bit as we go. I'm going to grab this thumb and I'm going to bring it down to about right there. Alright, so there's sort of an equation that I use to get my thumb facing exactly the right way. And you only need to remember three numbers, 90, 45, and 45. So I rotate this thumb on three axes. First, I'm going to rotate it this way 90 degrees. And if I hold shift while I'm rotating on this axis, you can see that right down below my thumb, the degrees that I'm rotating go in 5-degree increments. So I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. Alright. Then I'm going to rotate it on another axis 45 degrees. And then I'm going to turn it this way and rotate it again 45 degrees. And if I just do that 90, 45, 45, I'm going to get my thumb exactly how I want it. That's going to be just about perfect. Alright, and this edge of my thumb over here, I want to kind of line up right along this edge of that finger. So about right there. I'll probably have to adjust this a little bit in a minute as I go, but for now, that's not bad. Alright, so here we are. We have our fingers and our thumb in a pretty good place. So next I need the palm of my hand. And what I'm going to do is come over here. I'm going to append a cube. Alright, I will scale this cube down. Now the length of this should be roughly the length of my fingers. So I'm in a pretty good place. And this last bone of your finger. So if I'm on this side, basically half of this bone is where the crease is going to be, where my palm starts, right there. And then on this side, these knuckles actually are going to be back here. So I'm going to sit that about right there. I'm going to scale this way down like that. Might even go just a little bit more. Okay. And I already can tell right off that I've got these fingers are a little far apart. So we'll probably be squeezing them in a minute, but for now I'm going to just leave it like that. Alright, so we've got this right here. I'm going to subdivide this a few times, Control D to subdivide it, and then I'm going to take my mask lasso and I'm just going to mask something like that, and then Control click the canvas to reverse that, hold Alt, open up this padlock, and I'm going to move my gizmo right over here and just rotate that out to my thumb. And if I wanted to, I could smooth this out a little bit. I know that down the road I'm going to dynamesh this, so I'm not too concerned with how messy the wireframe is or anything. I'm not too worried about that. So I get this out to my thumb. Alright, so now I'm looking at my hand from this angle, and I know that unless you're flexing your hand, using your extensors, your hand's not going to be flat like this. It needs to be a little more on an arc, and there's a real easy way we can do this. So I'm going to press W and get my gizmo, realign my axes and recenter this, and then click on this gear. Actually, I have subdivisions on this hand, so watch. As soon as I hit the deformer I want, I'm going to get this message saying that I can't have subdivisions. So that's easy. I'm going to go over here to my geometry. I'll just hit delete lower and get rid of those. Go back to here, and the deformer I want is this bend arc. I'm going to click on it and I get this bounding box right here. And the tool I want in this deformer is this green cone. And all I want to do is grab it and pull it down a little bit like that. Now, this is pretty camera dependent, so I am snapping myself to the front view and I do not have my perspective on. I'm in an orthogonal view. If I'm at a weird angle, I could take this green control and I could really go all over the place like that. That's not what I want. I'm going to snap it to the front view and give myself an arc kind of like this. Might bring that up just a little bit. Alright, so when I'm like this, I have this gear. I'm going to click on it, click accept, and here's where I am right now. And all I want to do now is I need to get my fingers aligned back on this arc. So I'll click on my fingers subtool right here. I will take my mask rectangle, mask out the pinky, reverse that, and just pull this down to be on that arc. Do the same thing with the other fingers. Now, I always leave the middle finger alone. It's the middle finger is always, it's dead center of everything, and it's not going to move. So it stays where it is, but I grab these other guys and put them right along the arc where I want them to be. Alright, so you can see we've got this nice kind of curve here, curve along there, so that's basically what we're looking for. What I might do now with this palm is just use my move brush, and I'm gonna tweak this a little bit. I want this line along here to be half of this bone along here, so I think I'll push this in a little bit where I can see where that finger ends. And if I wanted to, I could come over here and hit transparency and I could definitely see where those other fingers are. Either way, makes no difference. But I am going to put a little curve here and tweak this just a little bit. Alright, maybe put a little roundness there. Pull this a little bit here. Alright, I also want to fan these fingers out just a little bit. So I'm going to mask this, reverse the mask, bring my gizmo in, and just fan that just a little bit. Go here. Fan that a little bit. And do the same thing to the pinky. Like I said, I think maybe these fingers might be a little far apart, so might grab these guys, move this in a little bit. Like that, which means I can take my hand here, scale that a little bit, and now we're getting our proportions looking a little better. Alright, so a couple more things. I mean, we're almost there in terms of just building this and getting the proportions that we want. I like my fingers to have a little more of a natural feel. I don't like them being in a straight line like this, so I want to bend them a little bit and get them looking a little more like the example I showed you earlier. So if you look at this example, you can see how I have these kind of progressively bending a little more and a little more, working your way down to the pinky. So I just want that same sort of thing here on my new hand. So pretty simple. All I will do is go back to my fingers, mask that out, reverse the mask, bring my gizmo over here. Now the knuckle is sitting back here, so I will go there, and that's where your fingers bend, is back here where that knuckle is. So on the first finger, the index finger, you bend it just a little bit, not much at all. Something just like that. Alright, and then I'll go to the next finger. So I'll go here, Alright, so bend that a little bit. Mask right at the knuckle. Bend that a little bit more. Maybe even bend it a little more at the last knuckle. Like that. Alright, so go to my next one. And you see, as I'm working my way down to the pinky, I'm bending them just a little more and a little more. Alright, so we're almost there. Alright, so something like that just helps my hand start to look a little more natural, and that's what I'm looking for. I'll take my clay buildup, which is BCB as in boy, and maybe I'll mark, let me go back to my palm, maybe I'll mark where these knuckles are going to be. Right there, so you can see they're kind of on an arc. Following that arc, and if I look to the inside of my hand, we have these kind of pads, so I'm going to pad out 3 places. I'm going to pad out the thumb right here, I'm going to pad across here, and I'm going to pad across there. And I might just smooth that out some. Also, we have from here, so on this side of the hand, halfway down that bone, the longest bone right here, halfway is where this is going to meet the palm of your hand. Alright, but on the other side, we have these troughs in between our fingers, so right there. Alright, because like we said, we know that this actually bends down at those back knuckles down there. So I'm not trying to be fancy about this or anything, I'm just making some marks because I know that that's where that's going to ultimately end up. Maybe I'll poke this in some like that. Alright, so I'm not concerned with how messy this is at the moment because all I'm trying to do is build this and get it ready to start sculpting. We haven't even really started sculpting yet. We're just trying to get our proportions correct. And your thumb has one less knuckle than your other fingers. I think actually I will bring this thumb in just a little bit. Maybe about there. So I can pull this in some. Alright, so something kind of like this. That's going to go all the way to there. So now I'm ready to put this all together. Now here's the thing. I said earlier that I really like to keep parts separate when I can to continue working on them. I still want to separate my fingernails because I haven't really gotten around to sculpting on my fingers yet to give them the high-res detail that I think they should have ultimately in the end, and so I still would like to keep these fingernails separate. So I was planning ahead when I created all my fingers to have one poly group and all my fingernails to have their own poly group. So now I can go down here to split and click group split. So now all of my fingernails are in one poly group, my fingers are in another, and now I want to merge my fingers with the palm of my hand and dynamesh all this stuff together. So I need the fingers to sit right above the hand in the stack in my subtool menu, and I can move these around in the stack. So you see these arrows right here, I can click this arrow and bump something down the stack. I can click this arrow and bump stuff up the stack. If I hold shift and click this arrow, I can take something from the very top of the stack, to the very bottom of the stack in one click. Do the same thing moving up. So I want to just sit my fingers right above the palm in the stack, and I'm going to go down to merge down and click that. And so now all of this stuff is in one subtool. And now I'm going to Dynamesh this stuff together. So we talked in class about how Dynamesh will reset your wireframe anytime you've stretched it out so far that it's deformed and it's hard to sketch on or sculpt on. Another use of Dynamesh is it will fuse two things together. So when we merge these two subtools into one subtool, even though they're in one subtool, they are still separate pieces. So if I were to just smooth this like this, and if I just keep going, you can actually see that although they are in the same subtool, that they are actually separate pieces, right? And I want this all to be one piece. So if I click Dynamesh down here, then it's going to fuse them all together. So I go to Dynamesh. I might knock my resolution down a little bit, maybe, I don't know, let's try 56. I think I want a little more res. Let's go back to 128. Alright, so you can see that if I get close here, those two separate meshes have now become one mesh. And if I were to hit Control W, now they're all one polygroup. And now, after I have something that is proportionately accurate, the fingers are the right length compared to each other, and compared to the size of the palm, now I have something that is proportionally accurate, and now I can actually start doing the high-res sculpting. So I mean, we haven't even really started sculpting yet. We're just building, and we have built what we're looking for, and now we would start sculpting using references and whatnot to ultimately get the high-res thing that we're looking for, which the end goal is something that looks like this. And we're going to talk later on in the quarter about how to get this really high-res detail that I have on here, so you can see all these tiny little wrinkles and all that stuff. That comes a little bit later after midterm. But what you have now is something that you can start working on to create the hand that you're looking for. Now, we still have something really close to this hexagonal shape, so I would come in and start sort of smoothing out those edges a little bit. I don't want this to be completely geometric. I just want it to have that kind of basic shape. So I would maybe start smoothing this out just a little bit. But there you go. That's how you build a hand, and we will talk more in class as we go about how to start doing all the rest of it and get you where you need to be.